All right, welcome everyone back to the Progressive Podiatry Project podcast. I'm Talysha and joined today by Jackson. How you going, mate?
Good, very good. Um, just put the little one down to sleep, and he's still fast asleep, so we can get a little bit more recording done. So yeah, it's all peace and quiet here at the moment, which is good.
The calm before the storm.
That's it. Yeah,
Oh, I miss that little hurricane.
yeah. He's going well. He's going well.
Excellent. Okay, so what we're going to be talking today about is I think the overarching topic will be how to help our patients navigate rehabilitation in the presence of pain. And how we do this with our approach is essentially leaning on the VAS and RPE inversion scale. So it's the inverse relationship between the visual analog scale of pain and the rating of perceived exertion. Now, just a little caveat that when we talk about RPE in this sense, we're not referring so much to the Borg rating of perceived exertion scale, which is more conditioning cardiovascular based or in a conditioning strength and conditioning base. So it's more so the relative effort of the prescribed rehabilitation exercises. So let's get into it. The Progressive Podiatry Project, here to share knowledge, insights and information for you to improve your clinical practice and, most importantly, help you help your clients. Okay, so how we help our patients navigate their rehab in the presence of pain. So when I talk about the VAS and the RPE inversion relationship, Jackson, I'll get you to talk to that and just give everyone a little bit of a breakdown of what it is and how we can use it.
Yeah, for sure. So pretty simple when you look at it. So RPE, rating of perceived exertion, how hard is that exercise, or how hard is this this activity out of 10? 10 being extremely hard, could not do another minute of it, and 1 or 0 is very little effort at all. You're barely lifting a finger. So on that scale of 1 to 10, you get them to report back to you on that number, and then that you could use that to guide sort of your prescription. So if it's on the low end of the scale, then you could increase the intensity of the exercise, and like a happy sort of medium, I guess, is around like a 7 or an 8. That's a pretty good level for some people. But then it depends on their pain, right? So if you think about the VRS or the VAS, visual analog scale or verbal rating scale, it doesn't matter. The 1 to 2 scale, 1 to 10 scale of pain, it's an inverse relationship. So if someone has 10 out of 10 pain, 10 is like the worst pain they've ever had. 1 is nothing at all, barely a scratch. Then, if they've got closer towards a 10 pain, then the exercise intensity that you give them is going to be more towards the lower end of that scale. So if you're a 1 with pain, you can perhaps prescribe a 9 with intensity, and vice versa. So if they've got like a 9, and if they're saying they've got 8, 9 out of 10 pain, then perhaps the intensity of the exercise would be a 2 or a 3 out of 10. Yeah. And does that sort of summarize it?
Yeah, I was just going to say that's a really good way to summarize it. And then, so my follow-up question to you with that, because I think that outlines it perfectly, is when do you feel that it's appropriate, or when do you use the inverse relationship when it comes to prescribing exercises for your patients?
I think I more just ask them when they're doing an exercise, if we know they've got a little bit of niggling pain, or if they report pain during the exercise, I ask them about that. So I ask, okay, what does it feel like? Like, does it feel like it's pulling? Does it feel like it's sharp? Does it feel like an aching pain? And then I ask them, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is that pain? And I explain the scale to them. I explain that 10 out of 10 pain is the worst pain ever, or for that pain that they've got, like 10 is the worst it's ever been. 1 is barely anything at all. And then if they're reporting that it's like a 1 or a 2 or even a 3 out of 10, like I just explain to them, okay, that's okay, let's keep going. And then you just monitor how that changes over time. And I also educate them that they can use that scale themselves. Like when they're at home doing their exercises, they can think about that scale and they can self-dose their exercises. So if they're ramping up on that scale of either during that set of the exercise or during that exercise session, or From session to session, if they feel like that pain scale is increasing, then they can back off themselves the intensity of the exercise. So I feel like it's really good to educate them on how to use the scale themselves, as well as using it for your own prescription.
Yes, and I definitely agree with that. And that's a point that I really wanted to talk to in this episode. So when we've titled it Navigating Rehab in the Presence of Pain, it's not just us as clinicians navigating it, it's us giving our clients the tools so they can navigate it themselves, because this situation so many clinicians would have experienced. So you've got a patient that's come in, you saw them 2 weeks ago, you prescribe them some exercises, and then they come in, sit down, oh, how are you going with XYZ exercise that we went? Oh, it hurts, so I stopped doing it. So then they've had 2 weeks where they haven't been adhering to or engaging in their exercises because for whatever reason, it's flared. Now, there can be a number of reasons for this. It can be a pain flare, so we may have just prescribed them a set number of sets and repetitions, and they've stuck to that and it's overloaded them, or they've had other activities going on, or especially if we're dealing with a chronic presentation of a musculoskeletal pathology where there may be some psychobehavioral drivers to the pathology. So they've had a really bad run of sleep, or work stress has gotten to them. So their stress levels may be redlining, therefore their pain levels may be escalating as well. So their tolerance for movement may be a lot lower because it's their cumulative tolerance to everything. But if we've given them the tools and that education on how they can use those numbers to self-dose, then that's how we can get them continuing to engage in their rehab. So they may find that if they're going through a little bit of a flare in between appointments, then it may be, okay, we'll stick to I call it the traffic light system, but it's essentially the inverse relationship. So, okay, it's once you have your discomfort, it may reach a sort of 4 or 5 out of 10 when you're doing the repetitions, stop at that number or just shy of that. So if things are going well, they may be able to do 20 repetitions of whatever exercise, and it's still in the safe zone or the happy zone, like the 0 to 3 out of 10. But then after 20 repetitions, it might creep into the 4 or 5, which is the ease up, back off a little bit. But then if they're going through a flare, if there's stress or whatever's flaring the symptom, then they may be only be able to do 2 or 3 repetitions before it heads into that 4 or 5. But even that being the case, they're still going to get more benefit and continue to engage in their movement, even if it's that really minimal dose. So they're not becoming fearful of movement, and they can continue to engage in our rehabilitation program.
Definitely. I can think of a client at the moment who is battling shin pain, and we're getting him to reload with a running program. And yeah, he's a little bit anxious about it. And when he reaches, he reports back to me that he went for his run and he had 2 out of 10 pain. Well, he said he was in a lot of pain, like he pain flared up when he was running, and he was really disappointed about it. And I just sort of asked him, well, okay, how bad was the pain? Like on a scale, like out of 10, how bad was it? And he goes, oh, probably like 1.5, 2, something like that. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm not worried about that in the slightest. And I just had to educate him that that's completely okay. And that, you can continue with the program. And again, educated him on how to self-dose or how to manage that. So my education to him was, okay, so if you feel like during your run, the shin pain ramps up to like a 4 out of 10, or even a 3, like if you want to be extra cautious. But yeah, if it's ramping up to a 4, then we'll just give an extra day's rest before our next run. So normally we're running on every second day. But if during one of those runs the pain flares up to a 4 or 5 out of 10, then we want to run every 3rd day. Give yourself that extra day's rest, listen to your body, and self sort of dose your running program. So yeah, it was really good to help him to understand that, a little bit of niggling pain, anything less than a 3 out of 10 is completely acceptable.
Yep. And I think that, using it as an education point for helping people understand their body better, understand their body's response to movement, and even understand load exposure you're prescribing them. It's a very powerful and often underutilized tool. And there's, so flowing on from what you were saying, like him using it as a load monitoring tool, what periods of time, so when you're educating a client on when they're going to be paying attention to those numbers, I've got my sort of 4 sets of time that I feel it's relevant. So when you're telling someone pay attention to the numbers, what period of time in relation to their exercise or movement exposure are you getting them to pay attention to it with?
Yeah, I'll have a guess to think of your 4. They may be the same. I'm not sure about one of them. So first one, during the exercise, obviously, and as the exercise, so as the number of repetitions increases, thinking about that number. After the exercise, so when they stop doing it and then they sort of walk around or go about their daily life after their exercise, what's the pain like then? Definitely sort of later that day or the next day. So how's their pain feeling then? Has it settled back to baseline from when they were doing the exercise, or that niggling pain after the exercise? Does it settle down? And then the next time they do the exercise, so when they go to do it again, do they have the same level of pain, or is it increased again, or is it perhaps reduced down? So yeah, whilst they're doing it, after they do it, later that day or into the next day, so sort of lingering symptoms.
Yep.
And then the next time they try to do the exercise again, yeah, are they the 4?
They are, and they're just in a slightly different order. So yeah, so they're the 4. So how I get them is like their baseline before they engage in the exercise. So which that's sort of your point for, but baseline, because that's where, like for me, that's where they start their rehab. So they haven't done the rehab, we've got their baseline. And then it's during the movement where they tap out, stop the movement, and then the recovery pain afterwards. Because so I'll sort of ramble on a little bit with this. So why I use, and I feel you would be very similar to this. So why I feel that these times are important for them to pay attention to those numbers is we've got our baseline, because that's their metric of how they're going. So if they're experiencing a flare, their baseline, so just the everyday grumble, whatever the pathology is, plantar fasciopathy, Achilles tendinopathy, whatever it is, the baseline, it might be sitting at a 1 or 2 out of 10 because it's just grumbly. So then it's going above that baseline. But then when we're actually getting them to do the movements, that's what will help dictate their self-dosage set repetition exposure. So we may have them aiming for, say, 20 repetitions of a calf raise. That might be the main part we're aiming for. Bless you. So we might be aiming for 20, 25 repetitions, but using the number system, that's how they self-dose in relation to that. So they might reach 4 repetitions before they have to tap out. Then the next time they might reach 7 repetitions, but so they can self-dose the number of repetitions that they do. And then the other thing is before the next set or exercise exposure, because it will dictate how long the rest break is. So these are all the exercise dosage variables that we've covered in the podcast episode, the 9 ways that we can modify an exercise. So the sets, the reps, the rest break, the tempo, frequency, all of that. So it's, again, we can use the numbers to help us identify the repetitions that we're aiming for, the rest break in between set exposures, the frequency, how long between exercise exposures within that microcycle, and then just how they're responding in pain. Because we may have someone that they have one day where it's just particularly grumbly, but then overall in between consultations, so at the end of that microcycle, they may have started out as their baseline at a 2 out of 10, but then their baseline consistently becomes a 1 out of 10 or a 0 out of 10. So it helps us also monitor their overall progress as well. So is that how you basically will use the numbers to determine those dosage metrics as well?
Yep, definitely. I think just in regards to pain, that's what level of pain they've got. That's how you determine how much further you can push them. And yeah, I probably don't ask as much, what their RPE is. Yeah, probably not from a sort of rehab point of view with specific exercises. Definitely with from a performance point of view, when we're moving into more specific strength goals. If they're doing squats, deadlifts, lunges, all that sort of stuff. If they're I'll ask them how hard that exercise is. Could you go heavier, etc. And maybe throw in a 1 to 10 scale of RPE then. But what about you? Do you use RPE as much early on in rehab?
No, so not like if we're talking from that sort of pure strength and conditioning point of view. So I think that's a really good point to hone in on. And that's what we sort of mentioned right at the start, that there is a difference between how we're using it in this inverse relationship versus pure strength and conditioning. So how I consider the RPE scale, it's more so my understanding of the exercise progressions that we might be aiming towards. So the amount of load that we can apply. So if we think about, we'll talk to plantar fasciopathy because I've just done the course that's out there. So I've got the whole exercise library there. So if we think about the ways that the plantar fascia loads across a spectrum of different movements. So down one end, active dorsiflexion and plantar flexion of the hallux. So that's applying a very minor amount of tensile load on the plantar fascia. That in the RPE scale in this relationship might be a 0 or a 1 out of 10. But then single leg hopping, very fast movement, plyometric type movement, or sprinting, that's right down the other end. So using the RPE in this sense is more so where your exercise fits on the tissue loading scale. And then our dosage also fits into that because we need to consider the tempo that we're applying it to. So that's how I'll use it. So it might be the first MTP range of movement might be, like I said, our 1 out of 10, the plantar fascia high load or the high load calf raise from the Rathleff protocol at a slower tempo that might sit at like a 4 or 5 out of 10, but then with a faster tempo that might sit at a 6, and then jumping might be at 8, and then single leg hops or sprinting might be a 10. So using it to map out the complexity and the load of the exercise relative to the pain, that's how I approach it. And is that what you do with it? It's been a while since we've practiced together, so
more so what I meant was probably don't actually ask the patient their RPE when it comes to rehab.
Sorry, so I scooted around, probably sidetracked. So I also don't, and I'll use it more so so I'll be asking them about their VAS,
and then you use that RPE yourself sort of in your mind to sort of progress then.
To figure out where they sit on the scale. So if they're the RPE is if their VAS is dropping down considerably with this exercise that's sitting here, we'll move them up the food chain as far as the complexity and the load of the exercise. But then this is where we again need to reinforce that education with them. So if we progress the exercise, educating our patient that we're increasing the load because you've moved up the food chain or the progression chain of this exercise loading, we're going to be loading the tissue more. Therefore, because you've moved up the food chain, you will probably experience a little bit of a jump in symptoms. So it will potentially flare it that little bit more, and then your body will adapt, pain will drop down, then we move you up the ladder. And then once we moved you up the ladder, pain might go up, but then it will drop down, then we move you up the ladder.
Yep, 100%. Do you feel it's a fine line when you're educating people about the numbers and the scale and thinking about them at the different points? Like, are you at risk of getting them to focus too much on pain when they're going through their exercise, through their rehab? Or I guess it depends on how you communicate it. What are your thoughts there?
That's a good question. I feel, like you were saying, how we frame it is very important, but I think it's probably, it gets in a sense, it has them paying attention to their body and their load exposure. So in a sense, it does get them to pay attention to it more, but I feel that it gives them the ability to pay attention with nuance. So instead of it just being no pain or pain, and no pain is good, pain is bad. And if they don't understand that nuance, like your running client that you were just talking to, where he had a 1 or 2 out of 10 and that was pain,
Yeah.
I would say that that's discomfort. So if they just have that understanding of no pain is good, any form of discomfort or sensation is bad, then I feel that gets them hyper focusing on the symptoms. But I like how I feel that if we explain that because you do have a musculoskeletal pathology, your body's going to be a little bit hyper vigilant and hypersensitive to the area. But if we're keeping it in that low dose, so our 1 to 3 out of 10, your body over time, it will adapt and it'll get stronger. And then that's where that 3 might drop down to a 2, might drop down to a 1. So I feel that if we frame it and educate them around what the numbers mean, it allows them to understand that nuance. So yes, they're paying more attention to it, but they're paying more attention to it from an informed perspective, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. I just had in my mind then of people, with spreadsheets where they're documenting their pain and they're just super hyper vigilant on it. Do you use pain diaries much? Does that come into your rehab? I know I have in the past. I sort of dabbled with it, but never really took off with it. Like it's certainly not something I do all the time. Yeah.
It depends on so I do, but not with everyone. So it depends on the client. So if you've got someone who you sit down and you're trying to take a clinical history and they're just vague as hell with the information they give you. So if it's, okay, so you've had a flare, do you know, like, what were you doing preceding the flare? Like, what led to it? Oh, I don't know. So if they're unable to give me a lot of information, then I've got, especially with runners or people that are quite active and they're doing a lot of different activities and we can't kind of nail in where their symptoms might be flaring, because if we can't identify what the driver is, it makes life a little bit more difficult. So
Yes.
if I find that someone isn't able to give me a lot of information just from the questions that I'm asking, then I will give them a tool, which may be a pain diary, for them to try and document so I can try and gather that information. So if their body awareness or their recall isn't fantastic, that's when I'll utilize it. But for some people, it's, you don't need it with everyone. So it's just if there's difficulty in eliciting the information, so you might be asking the right questions, but you're just getting a very vague answer, because some people, they've got a lot of other things going on. They're not really aware of what's happening. So giving them something to reflect back on so they can try and identify the correct information to give you, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Just picking your clients as to who you would want to use it for. You don't want to give someone a spreadsheet of things to fill in if that's just a whole nother complex thing. They're just not going to do it. So
Yeah, very much. It adds to because even it's the burden of care. So even someone taking the time out of their life and their normal routine and shelling over money to have a consultation with you, the pathology or the problem's already disruptive to their life. So the least disruptive we can make things, the better. It's the same with treatments. It's the same with frequency of appointments. It's the same with everything. It's the lightest touch. So if we don't need to get them to do a pain diary, don't get them to do a pain diary. If we don't need them to do 50 exercises to help their pathology, don't give them 50 exercises. So it's lightest touch, I feel. So it's, like you said, pick your patients.
Yeah, good, 100%. Do you feel there's anything else to add on that topic of VRS versus RPE?
No, I don't think so. I would like to, we'll pin this one for a future discussion. I think I would like to explore the actual Borg rating of perceived exertion. So go into it from a more strength and conditioning point of view, because because you and I both, when we're rehabilitating patients, we don't just stop at activities of daily living. Like you and I were both sort of prescribing exercise and rehab programs to go from pathology to performance. And in some of our other podcast episodes where we've spoken about that sort of transition from rehab mode into S&C mode. So I feel that there is a transition when we can start to use the RPE scale more for that S&C point of view. So I'll just pin that, keep that in mind that, future episode, I would like to drop one on that topic. But as far as VAS and RPE, as far as loading in a rehab sense, I think that sums it up really well. I don't really have anything extra to add.
Yeah, good. Excellent. We'll do a part 2 of this, definitely. With the Borg scale, I think it's really important. But good summary. I like the traffic lights, and I like the diagram you've got of the RPE versus the VAS with the the arc with the colors. That's good. So where can people find that? Is that in a resource somewhere?
It's only available within some of the online courses and the live content that we've got. It's one of the free resources that's included in a lot of the course purchases, but we do have other episodes that exist on the platform where we do go through this in depth. But I feel that we might do a flash sale at some point and do some free CPD that has the flyer. But it's not about, it is behind the paywall currently because it is one of the resources we do have for clinicians in both the plantar fasciopathy rehab masterclass and the exercise therapies and podiatric practice courses. So sorry if you want the free resource, keep an eye out on our free CPD platform, P3 for free, because every month we drop a free CPD event. And because Jackson has said this, I feel like it's put the screws on me. So keep an eye out, sign up because it is completely free. We drop a free CPD event every month. And Jackson's just chosen the next topic. So we'll throw the flyer in there and navigate the rehab in the presence of pain topic. So that's off the fly. But keep an eye out for that. Thank you for joining me, Jackson. And we've got a few more podcasts coming up in the next couple of months for you. And we'll catch you guys soon.
Sounds good.
Cheers.